What is happening, Cryptosomniacs? This is Jason here today with Amy Wan. We are going to be talking about smart contract dispute resolution and what is Sagewise. Hopefully get into a little bit of talk about securities and the future of ICOs right here on Cryptosomniac. Stay tuned. And all right, what is happening, Amy? Thanks for making time to chat with me today. I know you and I have met a little bit. Sorry, I see I've got my my video chat on, and we don't have a video chat, so I'm removing that. There we go. Okay. So yeah, just wanted, I know I've met you I saw you at the Helium panel, and then we met again at Crypto Invest Summit. So obviously you're pretty active in the blockchain space. You want to give a little bit of background information on yourself? Like, how did you get involved? Yeah, let's start with the intro.
So I am actually a securities attorney by training. I started my career in the federal government doing international trade and regulatory affairs. So, Department of Transportation, State Department, Department of Commerce, and basically moved back to California for personal reasons. And when I did that, that's probably around that time was probably the first time that I heard about Bitcoin or blockchain. I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do next, and was teaching myself how to code. And I think it was a Coursera class for build a website and ask people for Bitcoin. I was like, what is this Bitcoin thing, and why am I online panhandling, right? So that's how it all began. And when I moved back to California, I actually looked into, regulations like AML, KYC, BSA, stuff like that around Bitcoin, but ended up becoming general counsel for a real estate crowdfunding startup at the time, and then went on to become a partner at a law firm, and then eventually went on to found my own legal technology company. But, in early 2017, I had all these people calling me, being like, hey, be our attorney for our ICO. And I was like, looking at this thing, I was like, I think these things are securities. I do not think that you can just go out and willy-nilly just raise money like this. So I did not really take on any of those clients at the time, but I thought the space was really intriguing, and I was watching it, and it was really interesting because in early, I would say spring and summer of 2017, it was like every other week there was some sort of headline about smart contract getting hacked and an ICO losing millions of dollars. And I was like, this blockchain thing is never going to take off if people just randomly lose money, right? You have to create an ecosystem for transactional confidence and certainty. So we pivoted the business. Now we're called Sagewise. And what we do is we create dispute resolution infrastructure for smart contracts. In 2017 and early 2018, we were really concentrating on selling this to ICO projects,
sure.
Right? Except that we found two issues. One was that a lot of these ICOs raised a lot of money and they didn't actually build what they were going to build.
Oh no, none of them have done that. Come on, exit scams, come on.
And so that made it harder to sell to them. And the second thing was we came up against all this rhetoric of code is law, and I think I just got tired of trying to explain to these people, code is not law, law is law. Code and English and other language they're all just mediums of communicating intent, right? Because in law, that's what matters at the end of the day, intent. Right. And so with the rise of the STO industry, we're now focusing on basically offering this dispute resolution architecture to STO issuers. But I guess, the right way to think about it, this isn't so much dispute resolution as it is investor relations, right? If your STO investor loses access to their private keys, or if they pass away and their heir, raises their hand and says, hey, I'm the heir to this token, put it in my name instead, right? Or any other number of issues. I don't think STO issuers want to deal with that, and so we're basically creating an investor portal to handle all of those issues for them.
Very cool. Yeah, that's when I initially started looking into the project, I obviously went through the use cases and was like, yes, these all seem logical. And then of course, my anarcho crypto thing goes off and is like, but wait, this means it might be having to, there might be a layer of centralization, and then somebody's got a whole. So what do you say to people? What do you say to that? I mean, I guess first of all, what is your stance? I know you come out of traditional finance or the traditional securities world. So what is your stance on decentralization? How realistic is it to expect a full level of decentralization, or is it going to be necessary to have some level of centralization at least in the near-term future? And do you expect it to also be necessary going forward as people become more aware of, let's say, the advantages to blockchain technology?
So the thing I always like to say about decentralization is there was a meme that I saw on Facebook a couple weeks back, and it was like, decentralization. I do not think it means what you think. And it's like this Spanish dude from the Prince.
Yes, I was going to say Inigo Montoya.
Yes, exactly. And so, everyone says decentralization, and I think a lot of people haven't really stopped to think very much about it. In our company, we like to pride ourselves in being insanely practical, right? Mm-hmm. So my view about decentralization is, sure, there can be decentralization, but I think sometimes people get carried away with the hype and they take the concept too far. And so I see decentralization as this spectrum, right? Mm-hmm. On one hand, you have complete centralization, one central authority, and on the other, it's pure decentralization. And then there's this spectrum of everything in between, right? Mm-hmm. Like if you look at traditional things that have been around for a while, franchises. Sure. Franchises in some way are decentralized. If you think about our judicial system, right? In many ways, the American judicial system is decentralized because there's all these different courts and stuff like that. It's not like one big court where the people appointed on the court is like, it's the president, and that's basically authoritarian structure, right? And so a lot of what actually exists in the world is a lot of in the gray. It's very in between, and I think that's what we're going to eventually start seeing more in the crypto space. I think decentralization is great for open source projects, although maybe you still want a focal point, right? The Linux Foundation, they had a focal point, and even if you look at like the Ethereum Foundation, right? It's supposed to be centralized, but Vitalik
they've got a very clear
much
figurehead.
Yeah. And the Ethereum Foundation is a very central authority that helps facilitate movement within the community. So, I guess you could say I'm not a decentralization purist.
Fair enough. I was, but the more I'm also a practical realist, and I care about adoption. I really want people to actually identify the value here, see it, and be like, oh yes, we should adopt this because there are some clear advantages. So, I'm for adoption, and the more as much as I want to be like, no, pure decentralization and et cetera, it's just not a factor, right? I mean, it comes down to not everybody keeps all of their money in a single bank account, and not everybody wants to walk around with their life savings in their pocket all the time, which is, so I think there is going to be some obvious use case for custodial solutions, et cetera, et cetera. So, so with that, let's talk about the tech a little bit with Sagewise. So it's not a thing like a Lightning or something like that. It's where you're actually escrowing funds. You're just actually building a piece of the code that lets the smart contract not execute until the dispute has been resolved. Is that
so? What we really do. So, our company is half attorneys and half technologists, right? And in my experience as an attorney, it does not matter how many hours an attorney spends writing a contract. It doesn't matter how many other attorneys I send it to double check and take a look and make sure it's awesome. That does not mean you won't end up in a dispute, right? Because there's this concept of contract incompleteness, right? Code is very static and rigid.
Right.
But human beings are, I say, the most creative species on planet Earth.
Sure.
You know, we are very creative in finding ways to defraud people. We make mistakes. Things happen, right?
Sure. Well, and we make meaning out of things that might not necessarily have meaning.
Exactly. Or like you can't, and there's a number of things in the world that you can't even predict. You couldn't predict these California wildfires or that volcano in Hawaii that exploded, right? But that has real world ramifications on businesses every single day. And so if you're looking at this concept of contract incompleteness, basically you will see that smart contracts, they may have coding bugs, security vulnerabilities. If situations change, people may need to upgrade or even terminate their smart contract. And then there will genuinely be disputes over execution of the smart contract. Now, in the security token industry, which is where we're concentrating now, where disputes play out, it can be a number of things. It could be an investor being like, oh, you misrepresented this to me. It could be, I don't know, like a token holder being like, you know, I want to gift this to someone. It could be like, oh, like a grandson, you know, has access to the grandparents' portfolio.
Right.
Trades all their stuff, and, you know, if it's on exchange and highly liquid, like by the time you figure it out, it's changed hands 10 times, right? And are you going to like reverse all 10 of those transactions, right? And so when you have issues like this, as much as I would like to think that technology can solve all social ills, I think that's really what fundamentally makes us human, right? And so, you know, what I say, for example, to a lot of issuance protocols is it's great that you are building these clawback or these burn, reissue, cancellation features, but that's the technology part. Where's the governance layer? Right? Where are the human beings that come in and say, oh, okay, you are the rightful heir, or oh, you are the true token holder because you've provided them, stuff like that, right? There still needs to be a process. Not all of this is just about technology.
Yeah. So that's, I think there's a, I mean, we've seen issues with that, like just recently, specifically in the EOS blockchain, right? Everybody's up in arms about it because there's only 21 block producers, and there's effectively one of them that was like reversed the transaction, and a lot of people are very upset with this because it's supposed to be this giant decentralized architecture, and then they've come out and say, you know, decentralization wasn't really our goal, and which is very confusing to me because why did you set it up? I mean, effectively, it seems like they really just set up their ICO in such a way to protect themselves from the securities issues, right? Because, hey, we sold you Ethereum tokens. Somebody else has to launch these nodes and become block producers. And so to me, when I was initially looking at that, I was thinking, oh, these guys, you know, this is because they are trying to say, look, we don't have control over any part of it. It is fully decentralized. But for them to come out and say such a thing, I don't know. That kind of rubbed a lot of people the wrong way. So do you have any thoughts on that before I get to my next question regarding that?
So yes, I hear people on the whole like, oh, it's just 21 block producers. Like, how decentralized is that, right? But, you know, when I look at this entire ecosystem, I'm like, okay, like there's a couple, you know, Chinese miners and like Bitmain who actually really own the entire space, and it just takes a couple people to hard fork an entire blockchain. So how decentralized is that, right?
Right.
But what I will point out is, you know, the very interesting thing to me about EOS is the fact that they attempt to have a layer of governance, right? They have a constitution, they have
vote every 2 minutes,
base layer arbitration, which, albeit imperfect, and I say this because I chair the EOS Alliance Dispute Resolution Arbitration Working Group, right? The current form of that, although imperfect, at least they're trying, right? And the interesting thing on EOS is, you know, whereas in other blockchains, like if you lose it, too bad for you. Like EOS actually attempts to really value ownership rights. And so I think to date, since mainnet launched, there's been about 700 disputes or claims filed with their arbitration system, contesting or disputing rightful ownership if people like lost their private keys or got hacked from a phishing scam or whatever. And they're still figuring it out, but at least they're trying.
Yeah, I think there's a number of different, shall we call them, post proof of stake, I guess, algorithms that are looking really hard at the governance aspect. And I throw it back that like humans have never really been very good at governing ourselves. So how did we expect to get this right off the jump?
Exactly. And governance, it's always this like constantly evolving and iterating thing, right? Whereas code is very static. So I don't think we can delegate all the responsibility to code, to technology.
Yeah, well, and then, what happens, again, back to the main point of the reason that you started Sagewise, what happens when there's a hole in the code? But that's the law. So
well, I mean, look, if you go back to the DAO back in 2016, right, I think the DAO is like this prime example that code is not law, right? Like once the DAO got hacked, half of the community was like, oh no, like the hacker made off with $50 million, code is law, I guess they should get to keep it. And the other half of the community is like, where's the police? Like,
yeah, are you kidding me?
Yeah. Like this isn't fair, like this is our money, And they heard first the entire thing, which shows you like, even though that's what the smart contract said, even though they were supposed to honor it, they didn't.
Right. Yeah. And that's an even bigger problem, I guess, is if there's somebody behind the organization that's able to make that control. I mean, I guess that's sort of it, is right. We're supposed to be relying on the fact that electricity and math is going to take care of it all, and if the code is written correctly, then it should, in theory. But that's something I trip on a lot in this space. Is like, I'm not a programmer, right? I consider all the time, should I be learning Solidity just so I can at least have some idea when and realistically, that's ultimately what it's come down to, is it's not worth my time, because unless I'm going to go try to be a programmer, but often I think about that, and it's like there's a lot of people putting a lot of money into this space, and people are always like, don't invest in technology you don't understand, and I can read a white paper and understand the concept of it and the way that it's supposed to work, but there's who watches the Watchmen, right? Like, how are we going to, who can actually get in and read that code and say, all right, we found these holes, and, what groups are doing that sort of thing?
Yeah, so you actually bring up an incredibly important point, right? Like, you are very deep into the space, but you may not be able to program or read a smart contract. And actually less than 2% of the world can read code, right? And an even smaller percent can read Solidity code. So how can we, if someone enters into a smart contract, how do they even know what they're agreeing to, right? And that's a fundamental question. And this all comes back to usability, I think. And I think in order for the space to truly evolve, I think people are going to need to build an interface of usability for everyday people to use blockchain, use crypto, use whatever, because if you want my mom to download MetaMask to use the blockchain, I'm just letting you know, it's not going to happen.
Right, exactly. That's yeah. It's still complicated for the initiated. I mean, I have a number of contractors we pay using cryptocurrency, because they're all over the place. So it's much easier to just send them some ETH right now than to be like, all right, I'll write you a check, and hopefully it gets to the Philippines in a reasonable amount of time. And so that's all pretty easy to use. But again, go ahead and ask me the main payroll public Ethereum address, because I don't know, and I use it all the time, and I still am like 0x I don't know. And and I think for people who are the true believers and are this far into it, until it's easy enough for us to use, like I say all the time, it needs to be as simple as Venmo if we're gonna if we're gonna get your and my mom starting to use this kind of thing. Is they need to be able to go.
I know that you wanted to talk about BlockUsign real quick. And
Yes. So yeah, let's talk about
yeah.
that.
So I'll point out BlockUsign as an example, right? And we just built it as one small part of like our overall infrastructure that we're trying to build. But BlockUsign is basically blockchain-powered e-signature application, right? And there's issues today with, if you signed a contract, what's the authentic version of that contract, of that document? Like, Roger Ver had this problem, I think, a couple years ago when they had a whole dispute with a company in China. So we basically use blockchain to verify the authenticity of the e-signed document. But when you use BlockUsign, you never know that you are using blockchain. You don't have to download a MetaMask. You don't have to use a token, something private keys, right? Like the user interface is a regular e-signature application, and that's it. And you sign the document, and only when you have questions about the authenticity of that document, okay, you upload what you think is the authentic version into onto a web portal, and it comes back and tells you, yes, this is authentic version, or no, it's not. But
so it just scans it and basically it's like it can version control it effectively. It'll say, no, I see these words were not in the document that I've
it's got
indelibly
a hash,
recorded. Right, exactly.
It's a hash of the document, right? And so the whole thing is like, you never see the blockchain, you never feel the blockchain, you never touch, you don't even know you're touching the blockchain, and that's really how this should be, right?
I agree.
It's not like, oh, I use TCP/IP.
Yeah, people without the idealistic interest in this space could care less, right? Like, I'm enough that I'm like, I don't really like the way the system works for everybody these days, and I see maybe an idealistic alternative, right? That's what attracted me initially to this space. But I think unless you have some sort of idealistic reason that attracts you to this space like that, you don't care. You just want it to work, right? I just want it to work. I just want it to work, and furthermore, I want it to work better. And that's, we run into this a lot with a number of different blockchain projects. Is it's like, why are you tokenizing this, right? Why? Ultimately, your centralized SQL database is going to perform everything that you need to do faster, cheaper, and without a token. With that, decentralized slows things down, or at least for the time being, considerably compared to centralized solutions. So, it's always amazing how many people are just trying to use it for the sake of using it, not because it's actually going to improve the product or the reliability of the information therein, etc. So, I guess with that, I know you're a securities lawyer. So I guess my real question for you is: do you think, first of all, do you think crypto is over as it was for 2017 going forward? Do you think Main Street, your chance to make money was last year, and if you didn't get in, sorry, everything's going to securities, and you're going to have to be an accredited investor? Or do these STO type of offerings, especially where they're doing like tokenizing real estate or other sort of assets that real world people might be familiar with in the real world? Do you think are STOs only the future? Is there a chance for Main Street to be involved going forward? What's your take on that?
Well, okay, so it's not mutually exclusive, right? Because you can have an STO that involves Main Street. There are certain regulations in the U.S., 3 new regulations from the crowdfunding world that do allow for more access for investors. So one's called regulation crowdfunding, allows you to raise up to $1 million over 12 months.
Right.
Yeah, yes. There's Reg A Plus, right? $50 million each calendar year. So you can access those investors. ICOs, like the unregulated Wild West offerings, those I think are done for the interim, right? And what I mean by that is there's pretty much, I would say, very, very tiny appetite in the U.S., if at all. Abroad, ICOs have slowed down significantly.
Yeah.
From a securities law perspective, I don't think it's that, you can never have an ICO. But I think that you're going to be hard pressed to find a way where you can release tokens to the world in a way where you are, for example, fundraising money, because oftentimes that really does look like a security. It's not impossible, but the SEC has not gotten comfortable with any models that they've seen, right? And so I think at least for the near-term future, we have to expect that all these things will be STOs.
Yeah, that's kind of the feeling in our community as well. I mean, obviously we're a little bit biased on that given the involvement with Monarch token. We're kind of launching a dual security and utility token. So specifically with that, we did it specifically because we wanted to let both Main Street and be as close to the securities laws as possible in the event that down the road they're like, nope, everything's a security. So it's like, okay, well, we did the best we could up front and are hoping that goes. But yeah, I think that's a very common feeling in our community as well. Is just security tokens are going to be the only way going forward, and a lot of people are kind of freaking out because they saw this huge opportunity to make money, and now they're like, well, last year and with traditional ICOs, and they're like, well, what are we still going to be able to get involved? And I'm like, the truth is, I don't know. This is why I want to interview people that have a better perspective than me, so I can.
Yeah, so they already can. I mean, if you go to, for example, Start Engine or Republic Crypto, if you're just a regular retail investor, they have STO offerings on their website that you can invest in for usually as little as like $20 or $100, right? So people can already do that.
I knew Start Engine. I mean, obviously I met you at their last summit. I've been to a couple of their events, so I did know about that, and that was actually where I first learned about Reg CF. And then I've become a bit of an amateur economist. The longer I'm in crypto, I learn a bunch of all kinds of finance and things that I just wouldn't have had a lot of reason to be exposed to before. So
and another thing is, Republic Crypto is within the AngelList family of companies, right? And so they have ties to CoinList. So a lot of stuff that gets listed on CoinList sometimes also gets dual listed on Republic Crypto, except CoinList is for the credit investors, Republic Crypto is for the regular Main Street investors. So that's basically how it's divvied up. But there's still access.
That's awesome. That's actually, this is great. I'm so glad we got to chat today because I did not know about that. So my community will be happy to know. Okay, let's see what else. I think you kind of hit off on a lot of I had some questions put together that you kind of answered just naturally in your initial. So yeah, I mean, talk about, I guess, I know you have a fair amount of experience you used to work at the U.S. Department of Commerce. You've dealt with a lot of international trade and regulations around that. So how does that inform on how you operate in the crypto space? Like how does that you're used to dealing with moving money across borders. We've got a thing that changes the whole paradigm of that on our hands with crypto. So
it's really interesting. A lot of this has a lot of deep implications to law and jurisdiction and basically the world as we know it, right? And how all of that will shake out, I don't know. If I knew, I would place some bets and then hopefully become good.
You and me both.
I know, right? But like even jurisdictional issues, right? Like let's say a court in Malta comes out with some sort of judgment with some sort of that implicates blockchain. How are you going to enforce that on a public blockchain at least? And I don't know if you can. And even if you did it against a blockchain like EOS, where there's 21 different block producers, right? Well, hey, that might compel a block producer in Malta to comply with that. But how are you going to enforce it internationally? Like, they might just not care, right?
Yeah, so, I mean, we see that with exchanges all the time, right? I mean, the BitMEX guys are like, we don't care about your regulations. Like, nope, we don't let U.S. people come in. Like U.S. people can't trade on our site.
So it's very interesting because so one of the advisors to Sagewise is Dr. Jillian Hatfield, and she advises the World Economic Forum and a bunch of other very prestigious organizations around legal design and legal infrastructure. And she came out with a book in 2016 called Rules for a Flat World. So it's kind of a take on The World is Flat by, I think, Tom Friedman, right, or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
But the thesis of that book is, we used to live in a world where everything was very local, it was very centralized, and over the past couple decades, you have the internet and social media and stateless organizations,
sure.
and even the way people transact today is different, right? Like 30 years ago, not many people would regularly have manufacturers out in China, right?
Right.
But because the world today operates so differently, and even because of blockchain, right, the world operates so differently.
Sure.
But legal infrastructure has not kept up with that, and it's an interesting thing because you've got things like geophysical jurisdictions, you have sovereignty. Everyone thinks that the legal infrastructure that we have today has been around forever. You can't change it. But it's actually only about 400 years old.
Right.
It's only as old as the Treaty of Westphalia. And actually, if you look at legal history, we actually had a much more decentralized legal system before this because it's all concentrated around city-states instead of nation-states,
yeah,
right?
Sure. Mm-hmm.
And so, she basically posits in her book that because the economic behavior of the world is so different now, we actually need to change our legal infrastructure as well. And I think blockchain might actually be an impetus for all of that. So we'll see.
It's what's that Chinese curse? May you live in interesting times, right?
Yeah, exactly.
We certainly live in interesting times. It's crazy to see, the potential for world currency, and then the same people that are a fan of the potential for that are also like, we can't have one world government, and it's like, well, guys, which future are we working towards here?
Yeah, but if you think about it, whether it's cryptocurrency or even a stable coin, right? Like I had a conversation with some friends who are consulting for a company that does business in several different countries.
Mm-hmm.
I think they were like a cruise business, and they had issues with we accept Japanese yen and this and that, and it's too much for them to manage. They were like, let's look at this blockchain thing instead, right?
Yeah.
And if trade is truly so global, isn't there so much transactional inefficiency in having all these different currencies?
Yes,
right?
I mean, for sure, because again, it's just adding more middlemen to the equation that lets them extract their little piece of the value along the way, right? I mean, that's part of the beauty of a cryptocurrency exchange is I don't need to send it to the bank so the bank can take their cut to turn my dollars into yen or euros or whatever. Is I can just turn my Bitcoin into Monero or whatever, and it's just the network fee or perhaps the exchange fee depending on where you're converting it, but
I think this is also where, dispute resolution comes into play, right? Because your average consumer is not going to have the sophistication to sit there and understand cold storage and wallets and private keys and stuff like that. And so if it's just a matter of, my business got hacked, my customer got hacked, too bad. That's not good enough to achieve real mass adoption with regular consumers. And so we need to have some sort of system that says, okay, well, you owned this, it was stolen from you, but that doesn't make it theirs.
Yes, I agree with that. And also I could see, the what you had touched on, inheriting, right? I don't have kids yet, but I've got nieces and nephews. So, if something happens to me, the nieces and nephews are who's getting the stuff. But
yeah, but how are they going to get your private keys?
None of them have any clue. My brother would be the only one that even has any clue at all of how this stuff works because I talk with him about it. But the rest of them, I'd be like, and realistically, it's to the point where I'd almost rather they get my private keys than my other investment accounts because I don't want it just going away into the ether. So yeah, I think those are real factors that need to have solutions in them again before we'll see adoption, certainly. Because yeah, that's something we talk about a lot. Is a lot of times if my credit card transaction, or if my debit card gets declined for some reason, but I know there's money in the account, I need to be able to call and say, what's going on with this? Or, you guys said I couldn't take any more money out of the ATM. I'm just trying to think of any reason why I've actually had to talk to somebody at a bank recently. But, I think a lot of times people want to have somebody to call. And while I think that hopefully with the advent of, keep your private keys or it's lost, hopefully we get a little bit more of personal responsibility back into society instead of just like, I don't know, it's somebody else's problem, it's not me. That's not going to, these shifts don't happen overnight. And realistically, it is good to have a plan B and a plan C, or at least some sort of alternative in the event of a crisis. So yeah, I could see a use case in the space for this. And, specifically as it comes to, if we ever get back into a bull market and people are jumping all over ICOs and STOs again, I can see this being a very, very valuable thing in the space. So pretty cool.
Definitely.
So where can they find you? What else do you got going on? Are you going to the blockchain beach? What is it? Trust machine function? I'll be out of town for it, but are you? I met you through them. I don't know how heavily involved you are with those guys. I don't know. You got anything you want to plug? Feel free to plug it.
Yeah. So the next thing I'm going to is probably going to be. It's in Vegas. I think it's oh my God, the name is escaping me.
You just missed World CryptoCon. It was.
It's not World CryptoCon. It's BlockCon.
BlockCon.
Block CryptoCon. No, not BlockCon. Oh my God, there's so
many. They all have like sort of the same name too. So it's like World CryptoCon, Crypto BlockCon, Block CryptoCon, Block.
But it's a conference in I want to say earlier mid-December.
Okay.
Out there.
Are you speaking?
And, sorry.
Are you doing a speaking gig, or are you just going to it? Or? Cool.
Yes, I am.
Very cool.
And I'm hoping that's going to be it for the rest of this year.
Yeah, I've tapped out on conferences.
We're heads down, basically trying to achieve product market fit and get traction and revenue. All those milestones that startups are supposed to have, except for in the crypto industry.
Right. No, we can just look. I'm really smart. Look, here's my proof. Give me a bunch of money. Let's do this.
Yeah.
Well, very cool. Yeah, well, obviously, let's stay in touch. We're clearly operating in the space. I'm normally in LA. And if you've got any other fun, exciting things that we need to know about, always happy to have you back on if you want to come on for an update. And, let me know if there's anything I need to be attending in the LA area coming up anytime soon.
Sounds good. Awesome.
Well, hey, I appreciate you taking time, and we will talk with you soon.
Okay, take care.